Shalom. Call halal Yahweh Shai Hashem Badash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all the hopefully elect on my fellow Akim that are doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. To the confusion of faith that are joined unto our ranks. Never before has that saying been so surreal, risking our lives and our freedom to do so, to do the work of Yahweh Shai, right, doing the work of the Lord. The demonization has started. False fake news is making a move on the Hebrew Israelites, and they're definitely playing up the vibration or that lie of continually saying black, black, black. When our skin is brown and we are not black, we do not identify with black. We don't call ourselves black. That is a label that they placed upon ourselves, upon us. The same as they placed the title of white upon themselves in 1681 in Virginia. The whole black and white thing is just to control the narrative. But it's not going to work this time. All right? CNN has been found to be exactly what Donald Trump said. They are fake news. As a matter of fact, all of Esau's media is news. All of Esau's media is fake news, is what I meant to say. So let me read a scripture. All right? And that first scripture is Wisdom of Solomon. All right? 5:1. And it says, "Then shall the righteous man stand up in great boldness before the face of such as have afflicted him and made no account of his labors. And when they see it, they shall be troubled with terrible fear and shall be amazed at the strangeness of his salvation so far beyond all that they look for." And the nervousness and the fear is setting in with Esau, Edom, because the truth is going global. The true, when it says that this gospel shall be spread to the four corners of the earth and then the end shall come. Now Esau is getting nervous. They're getting afraid. All right? So let's listen a little bit to their lie.
On Friday, January 18th, three groups of people converged on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. A small gathering of black Hebrew Israelites, a religious activist group.
Now you see that? Now the guy who's speaking is a so-called Puerto Rican. And so is the guy to his left. But they're calling them black. All right? This just goes to show you how much of a liar and bearing a false witness that Esau Edom, the so-called white man, does, has done, and still does. Okay?
Group that believes African Americans are God's chosen people.
And so they left out the Native Americans and Hispanics, and they called two Hispanic men because two of the men in that camp, the main speaker and one of his readers, are both so-called Puerto Ricans, Ephraimites. Okay? So that's them showing you tidbits and showing you what do they call it? They call it when they edit film and edit speech and give you a false narrative. And this has been the MO of the so-called white man who is Esau Edom. Remember, in 1681 in Virginia, he labeled himself white when they're really red. They're the Edomites, the wicked that the Bible speaks of. All right, indeed, Edom is Rome.
Students from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky for the March for Life, and people attending the Indigenous Peoples March. A video showing a confrontation between the high school students, including junior Nick Sandman, and an Omaha elder Nathan Phillips went viral and sparked outrage.
Right, so everyone gets all this outrage, and then they put up another video showing you the Hebrew Israelites and these guys who really, in my opinion, they really shouldn't be teaching anyway, from what I've seen. All right, but what they were doing in their defense, what they were doing was righteous. It wasn't that they weren't doing anything wrong. But this is also the same group that was seen at a firing range shooting weapons and putting it on video, pushing that vibration. Then this same group ends up on the news. It almost looks like it's a setup. Because that's the sort of thing that Esau Edom does. All right? It happens to be the same guys who put out that vibration. All right? When we're spiritual people and we use the scriptures to fight for us. All right? The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but yet spiritual. And it just happens to be that this particular group of Hebrew Israelites, that their video goes viral with Esau editing it, you know, doing an editing job and then controlling the narrative, showing you footage, showing you snippets, letting you hear a word here and a word there, and then gives a false narrative of what's actually happening. That's Esau Edom for you, man. Okay? This is Psalms 119 and 46. And it reads, I will speak of thy testimonies also before kings and will not be ashamed. All right? So we're not ashamed of the truth. And you're not going to use your fake news and your media to try to shame us from telling the truth about who you are. All right? Let's let one of your own tell of who you are.
Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And Yahweh shall bring you into Mitzrayim, Egypt again, with ships. And the way of which I said to you, you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold to your enemies for slaves and female slaves, and no man shall buy you. And that is what happened to the regal class of the house of Judah. And I want to give you a brief history. I won't go into it too much, but I can't just make that statement because there'll be people that'll push back. But I want to give you a brief history on slavery. I was just amazed, I got to tell you. I mean, when you come to America and you talk to people about slavery, you can talk to black people about slavery, white people about slavery, and they'll give you all this history on slavery, and it only goes back to the 16th and the 17th century. And you're like, don't they teach you the history of slavery? Why? Ask the bloody question. Why are they only teaching you the history of slavery as far back as the 16th and the 17th century? Why are they only going that far back? Because they don't want you to go farther back than that, because then you'll actually find out the truth. But from the 16th and 17th century, we'll teach you about slavery. You've got to go further back, and you've got to understand and question, why do they do this throughout the whole of America, in all the public schools? Why do they only go back as far as the 16th and the 17th century to talk about slavery?
Because the same people that control the public schools and the textbooks and the information that's shared with you are the same people that share or that control the media. And they're not going to tell you the truth because they want to push their lie and control the narrative. This is what Esau Edom does. All right? And now that the truth is coming out, the demonization. The man said the black Hebrew Israelites believe that African Americans, there's no such thing as African. Africa is named after a so-called white man named Scipio Africanus. And America is named after another so-called white man, Amerigo Vespucci. So you're going to call these brown people after the names of two so-called white men and then say that's a nationality? First, they were a color. They were Negroes first, and then they were coloreds, then they were blacks, then they became African Americans. Fitting the prophecies that they will be called by bywords. But the rest of the family, the so-called Latinos and Native Americans, you're leaving them out of the picture as well. And try to deny that is denying trying to deny their own nose on your own face. The oldest Hebrew relics ever have been found among the so-called native tribes. and things were found among the native tribes that were clearly from the so-called Middle East, from Syria and from the land of Israel, were found in the possession of so-called Latinos and Native Americans. So CNN, Fox, NBC, ABC, all of the media, all of the educational systems and programs and textbooks are all liars. And this man here is actually speaking the truth. And the man in the beginning of the video said that the black Hebrew Israelites, all right, it's just Hebrew Israelites. Yes, we do believe that so-called African Americans are a part of the 12 tribes of Israel. They are. And he's going to give you the history, and then I'm going to give it to you the source. The main source where it comes from is right here in Joel, the 3rd chapter. All right? The history that he's going to give you.
We've got to go further back than that. Because Islam designed infernal slavery. And then the Ashkenazi Khazars, those who say they are Jews and are not.
Now that he said that, let me get it. Okay? This is Revelation 2 and 9. And it reads, "And I know thy works and tribulations and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." And see, now that they're bringing this mainstream and trying to twist it, it's a horrible mistake on their half, because what all it's going to do is cause people to ask more questions and want to know what is really going on and what's happening. And the more you dig into this story, you come to find out that what you're looking on the screen, what you're looking at on the screen is true. All right? And those Ashkenazi Jewish people are really the seed of Edom. They're Amalek. And it says it in their own history books and in their encyclopedias. I can give you some really strong references and sources that say so.
Are the ones that marketed it, and the regal Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah were the main recipients of it at the hands of the indigenous black Africans.
So what he just let you know is that there's a so-called, you got Africans who are dark peoples, so-called black, because they're just super dark brown as well. And then you had Hebrew Israelites who are a different dark race of people. And a lot of the Arabs were dark too. All right? There are Arabs today that are just as dark as some Africans and darker than some Negroes. Yet they're not called black. Because that word black is a controlled word for a controlled narrative, just like white is. All right? So he's telling you the truth. All right? Because they had a part of Africa called Negro land. So you had these dark Israelites in Africa along the west coast of Africa. As you can see on the map, they set up all these kingdoms there. And then they were surrounded by all the real Africans. And the real Africans, the Arabs, and the so-called white man took the children of the sons of Israel into slavery.
You've got to understand, the regal class of the house of Judah came down from Israel, and they came into the land of the black Africans.
Two different races of people.
And the black Africans resented the regal class of the house of Judah in their land because they had laws, they had customs, they had civility.
We also had beef. We had been enemies. All right? We had fought many wars against those Africans in times past. All right, and now we were flourishing in their land, and they hated it, and they hated us because they hadn't forgotten what we'd done to them. Neither had the Edomites. We had beef with the imposter Jewish people who are truly really the tribe of Amalek, who are the #1 enemy of the Israelites.
And they were a regal class of Negro that came down into Africa, and later on, it was the Ashkenazi, the Islamic slave traders as well, that then worked together with the indigenous black Africans to enslave the regal house of Judah. This is what we've got to understand, but you've got to go back before the 16th century to understand the roots of it.
So let's get it. This is Joel, the 3rd chapter. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah, which is a southern kingdom, so-called Negroes, the so-called Haitians, and the so-called West Indies. That makes up the southern kingdom. Benjamin, Judah, and Levi. Okay? And Jerusalem makes up the rest of the so-called Latin tribes and native tribes, and of course our scattered confusion of face among all the heathen, because it's not about color at all. Some of our people are scattered among all races, and among all races are Israelites going to be found because of this slave trade that we're speaking of. These Israelites, and then another thing they're not telling you is that the slave trade started with the so-called Latinos and Native Americans, and then what we're about to read, or what we've been listening to, happened. So it was 100 years of trading so-called Latins and Natives before this trade of the Negroes even started. And Seville, Spain became the reverse slave capital of the earth. I wonder if CNN will put this video on. And if they do, they'll do it in snippets. They won't play the whole video. And I will gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people, for my heritage Israel, which they have scattered among the nations, and parted my land. The land of Israel has been parted between Palestinians, who are not even the real Palestinians, and Israelis, who are not the real Israelites. And the nations are gathered in that area, in the land of Jehoshaphat, which is properly said Yahweh Shaphat, which means yet again the end is near. Okay? So for that action that happened that long ago, the Lord is just now gathering these people. But that's how the Lord operates. Time is different in the heavens than it is with us. It tells you in Peter that 1,000 years to us is just one day to the Lord. So all this destruction, pain, and suffering that you did to the apple of his eye is still fresh in his head. And hell to pay. And that's what's about to happen. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. And that's what you're looking at. You're looking at boys being sold, girls being sold, women being sold for harlots, boys being sold for harlots. And they were trading musket guns and wine. All right? So you're looking at a Hamitic Africans, Hamites, selling Hebrew Israelites. All right? That's what you're looking at. And the ship owners were all Jewish. So all the synagogues in America and the stock market in America was all built upon this right here. This was the money that financed the stock market. Hence the reason why on Black Friday the markets will always close, and they will always close on Jewish holidays, because the Jewish people ran the slave trade. They were in charge of it. They owned all the ships. You can Google that and look up these ship owners and see exactly what I'm talking about. Well, CNN put this on the news. And yeah, what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will you render me a recompense? And if you recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your head. Because you have taken my silver, my gold, and carried away into your temples my goodly pleasant things. The children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. So you sold the Israelites to so-called white Americans. And you took them over to, because it said Jerusalem and Judah. Remember, Seville, Spain became the reverse slave capital of the world. And what were they trading in slave? What slaves were they trading in Spain? Tainos, so-called Mexicans, so-called Native Americans. They even showed you that in the Bozier show, that television, that cable show, the Boziers, the Borgias. All right, when they brought the Tainos in chains and before the kings and queen of Spain, and then they continued to finance Christopher Columbus's trip. They were bringing slaves and gold back and forth. And the result of that, let's just jump down to, let's just read verse 7 and 8. And behold, I will raise them out of the place whether you have sold them, and return your recompense upon your own head. And that's what you're seeing. That's what you're seeing. What you're seeing is you're seeing the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and the confusion of face remember themselves and wake up to who they are, as the prophecy said would happen to the Israelites, because according to the Bible, the Israelites got cut off from their heritage through slavery by being put on slave ships and sold to the four corners of the earth and scattered. That's what you're witnessing. That's what you're seeing. In result, and I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hands of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabians, to a people far off, for Yahweh hath spoken it. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty man, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And that's what's happening. World War III is at hand. And the Israelites are waking up, and it's going, and as a result of that, the Edomites, the so-called white man, are in fear because they can't deal with us scholastically, or they can't deal with us scripturally, so they have to turn to carnal means. And one of the carnal things first you have to do is you slander a name before the slaughter begins. So that's what you're seeing. You slowly watched the terrorists, the face of terrorism, turn from someone who looks like a typical Palestinian guy to a so-called black man with a beard. That's what you're watching, what you're witnessing. Back to Wisdom of Solomon, the 5th chapter. Then shall the righteous man stand in great boldness before the face of such as have afflicted him and made no account of his labors. And when they see it, they shall be troubled with terrible fear, and shall be amazed at the strangeness of his salvation, so far beyond all they look for. And they, repenting and groaning for anguish of the spirit, shall say within themselves, this is he whom we sometimes had in derision, and a proverb and a reproach. Right, calling us niggers and spicks and wetbacks. We fools accounted his life madness and his end to be without honor. How was he numbered among the children of God, and his lot among the saints? And that's what they're angry about, because the so-called white man, they know we really are the children of Israel, and they have a problem with it. And the Lord has a problem with them. So once again, will CNN play this video in its entirety? Call halal Yahweh Ba'Shem Abashai Ba'Shem Rakak Wadash Wa Abad Babal.